My name is Lex, and this week on Spidey Signals, me and my co-host Alex discuss the final 6 episodes of Greg Weisman and Victor Cook's The Spectacular Spider-Man, George Lucas's Rhino Man, and the ethics of cartoon child murder. Get ready to bring justice to us all, because it's time for Spidey Signals. Welcome back to Spidey Signals, the podcast where two guys with the same name talk about Spider-Man. I'm Lex.
And I'm Alex.
Last week, we watched the first half of this final season of The Spectacular Spider-Man, which, again, we keep saying this every time, but we thought it was good.
Oh, yeah. And that has not changed with the finale here.
Oh yeah, it hasn't changed, but it's certainly something. We'll get into it.
We sure will.
Let's just jump right in. We've today we are discussing the final 6 episodes of The Spectacular Spider-Man. These episodes were released from October 7th to November 18th of 2009. The series was created by Greg Weisman and Victor Cook. These episodes were directed by Jennifer Coyle, Kevin Altieri, Mike Goguen, and Victor Cook, and they were written by Andrew Robinson, Nicole Dubbock, Kevin Hops, and Greg Weisman. As for our cast, we've got Josh Keaton as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, Lacey Chabert as Gwen Stacy, Alana Ubach, I think I'm saying that right, I have no clue, as Liz Allen, Joshua Labar as Flash Thompson, Trisha Helfer as the Black Cat, Nikki Cox as Silver Sable, James Arnold Taylor as Harry Osborn, Alan Rations as Norman Osborn.
I'm something of a normal myself.
I'm something of a normie myself, and Steve Bloom as the Green Goblin.
Thunderous applause for me here.
It's been these last 6 episodes have been a lot. But again, as usual for this particular set of episodes, we don't have any personal experiences. So, Alex, do you want to just jump right into the plot of these last 6 episodes?
Absolutely, I do. And it's some really solid stuff here. We'll get right into it. We begin with the 8th episode of the second season, Accomplices. Which begins with Black Cat breaking into Manhattan high-rise, as she's wont to do, effortlessly making her way past various security measures, lasers, and such.
80 million lasers. There's like so many fucking lasers in this one like a conference room.
Easily the most lasers we've seen in one room here, and that's saying something about this show.
I don't think I've ever seen more lasers in a single room since like the Resident Evil movie hallway. That like we're talking that level of lasers.
Yeah, it's pretty excessive, which turns out to not matter a terrible amount, because just as she's about to claim her target, her prize, she is caught by a group consisting of Hammerhead, Doc Ock, the Vulture, Hatch, Roderick Kingsley, and Donald Mencken of Oscorp. Quite the assembly of douchebags here.
We got Roderick Kingsley, who was only going to show up in this episode and then never for the rest of the series.
I love anything to do with Mencken in this show, and there will be some more Mencken stuff later, because like I forget he's a character all the time. And he's like, there was a point in this run of episodes where Osborn says something like really important to Mencken on the phone, and you hear Mencken like repeat it back, like expository stuff. And I found myself wondering, why does Norman tell this random guy all this stuff? And then I remembered he was Mencken.
Yeah, he's Norman Osborn's right hand man. It's like,
he's just there a lot. It's great.
He just looks like a guy. That's his problem. He doesn't have a distinct. He doesn't have Norman Osborn's waves. He doesn't have a distinctive look about him.
So we have this assortment of evil doers, not good guys hanging around who catch Black Cat in the process of trying to steal this MacGuffin. She's escorted away, and I think it's it's super fucking weird that they just let her go.
Yeah,
Uh,
she's like, what? They're like, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh, I didn't know this was an auction going on, and she just kind of
she just
leaves.
and that's the thing is she's just let go and they just usher her out the door. Nobody checks to see if she's like still hanging around or about to break in again or what. And she doesn't either like my recollection. She's just out of the picture here. That's a super weird way to open the episode, but whatever. It's not the weirdest. It's
I
fine.
guess that saying about no honor among thieves is not as true as they say it is.
Yeah, right. They could at least let her bid. Uh
They've been polite.
Hammerhead, as I said, escorts Black Cat out, no fuss, and Minkin announces that bidding will begin soon on this mysterious prize. The final bidder to arrive to this meeting is Sable Manfredi, the daughter of notorious crime boss Silvio Silvermane Manfredi, which is a bit of a deviation from the comics, but I have some trivia about that later, so we won't get too deep into that right now.
Yep.
Who is an acquaintance of Hammerhead's. Uh, from there, bidding begins with Hammerhead and Sable matching pace for the most part, throwing out some seriously high numbers to get this whatever it is. Patch pathetically tries to bid 1 cent above Sable, which I thought was an actual like solid comedy bit. Like, what the fuck, 1 penny? It's great.
Secure the
Uh,
bag.
Kingsley, however, shoots too high with his bid. It exceeds the amount deposited in his or any of the bidders' accounts at this very moment in time, and the auction is put on hold until the following evening so that the bidders can put more money into their accounts. The pacing here is really funny to me at the very end because the guy straight up just like hits the gavel and was like, "All right, we'll reconvene tomorrow," and everyone is dressed like in fucking tuxedos and really good stuff. It's like, bitch, you know how much crime I had to put aside today to be here dressed like this tomorrow?
Dr.
Come
Octopus
on.
is dressed up in his nice fancy suit.
He looks like a fucking vampire and I love it.
Oh my god, I have a note. Straight up have a note for that. I think for episode 10. Like this, we're obviously going to get into this later, but I might as well talk about it right now. In that episode, they're having another like gang meeting, and Doc Ock is there, and he's wearing like a straight up fucking like Dracula cape with like the big collar and like the red trim. It's fucking so stupid. I love it.
Stock up rules. Um, from there, we get a scene at Midtown High with Captain Stacy giving a seminar on the importance of partnering. Once again, not really subtly at all, hinting, quote unquote, hinting that he knows Peter's secret. I love that in this show. I like Captain Stacy and Peter's dynamic and most representations of it. Actually, again, for everything we've said, Dennis Leary was one of my favorite parts of that first Amazing movie.
Yeah,
But this
Dennis
is
Leary was like the best part of the first Amazing movie.
oh, for sure.
He
Man,
was so good. We cut to an audio clip of him in the middle of our discussion of the final fight sequence. That's how good he is.
yeah, that crazy bastard loved his Branzino.
Ah,
Uh, Once again, not so subtly talking about Peter's secret right to his face, which is always fun. Harry and Peter have a great little interaction regarding Peter's new Osberry phone, which I hate saying with my mouth.
I like how I think maybe in the first episode we did of Spectacular, we talked about how like there's not a whole lot of anything that would like tie it down to a certain era or time period, except
Mhm.
for fucking Osberry.
It's great. It's really great. This was
Like
like if this had been made 1 year later, it would have been called like the I something. You know,
like
they would
it
have
would have
aged
been called like the O phone or something.
There you go. Exactly.
This
Precisely.
is the period when the iPhone is still like like a new thing, and like BlackBerry's still trying to hold on to its market
I knew
dominance.
one single person I knew with an iPhone in 2009. So yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
Uh, Harry's initially excited, but gets bummed when he learns that Norman personally gave the phone to Peter. Another great little "Oh wow, your dad loves me" moment. Uh, Harry leaves, little dejectedly, and Liz shows up and reminds Peter that they're going out to dinner that evening, which Peter completely forgot. Rather, he promised Fred Foswell of the Bugle that he would drop by after school, but he's going to try to be on time this time for this date. Liz is fully aware and confident that Peter will be late for this, but will consider it a victory if Peter actually shows. At the Bugle, Jameson is in the process of refusing to run Foswell's story on the auction, and Silvermane's intention to use it to reestablish his power base after getting out of jail. That's when Peter arrives. Uh, Foswell apparently won a Pulitzer, which I thought was a fun little throwaway line on his Silvermane expose about 12 years prior, which presumably helped get Silvermane behind bars. But Jameson claims that all Foswell has done since then is get lazy with his journalism. Uh, has a brief encounter with Peter on his way out, dejectedly telling him that there may not be a story here to take pictures of. But eventually, Peter does coerce Foswell into saying that pictures would possibly change Jonah's mind. All the while, of course, just an excuse to get some Spider-Man shit done. Uh, I love it. It's good stuff. Peter being a
Oh
good
yeah.
guy. The auction resumes without Patch, as his employer withdrew all the money from his bidding account. Not suspicious or anything. Patch leaves the building and is spotted by Peter, only for Pete to be shocked when Patch reveals himself to be Foswell. In a fun twist that we kind of briefly touched on, I think a few episodes ago, we brought Patch up for the first
Yeah,
time.
we talked about it earlier because Patch is a character from the old Lee Ditko run that I
Mhm.
remember. It's like, oh, it's Frederick Foswell's secret identity that he uses to get in on the ground floor of crime.
Fun stuff. Bugle, investigative journalism.
That's fun.
Take that, Jimmy Olsen, you bastard.
Fuck you.
While he was inside, Foswell managed to put a bug on Mencken, and he and Peter listen in for a bit. Foswell very comfortable with including a 15-year-old in this espionage, by the way. Foswell thinks that Silvermane's release from jail is going to result in a major gang war between Silvermane's more traditional mob, the big man's current crime empire, and Doc Ock's new wave of super criminals and mercenaries, which is kind of like the overarching tissue that connects this final season, rather this final half of this season of episodes is this all this gang war talk. The auction prize turns out to be of some real significant importance. It is the specs to mass produce the Rhino's armor, which would give the owner the means to create an army of super mercenaries that presumably would be just impossible to stop. One Rhino is something, but, upwards of hundreds to thousands of Rhinos. We're into the Rhinoverse now.
The real question is, what do those plans like solve the sweating issue that fucked up the original Rhino? I
It's
feel like it wouldn't.
there's a computer fan shortage in this world now instead of graphics cards because they took millions of them to cool down all the Rhino soldiers.
Good God.
The bidding continues, and eventually Kingsley wins with a bid of a mere $500 million, which, like, I get that that's not an insignificant amount of money. That's a considerable fucking amount of money.
That's $500 million.
But, like, I don't know. I feel like that's low for like unstoppable army and control of all of New York when you consider Disney bought Star Wars for 8 times that amount.
I guess that's true.
I hate that that's how I am, but that's what I use in my head as like a metric for big business deals. Is okay, well, George Lucas got $4 billion for Star Wars. He could have had 8 times the Rhino army that Kingsley could have had.
Rhino Army or Star Wars?
I want to build an army of Rhino men.
No, I'm gonna put them in my movie. I'm gonna put my army of Rhino men in my movie. It's so dense. Every frame has so many Rhino men.
I would actually watch it too. That's the fucking sad part.
Every
Uh,
character is just a Rhino man.
Peter wonders what Kingsley, who is, by all reports, a perfume manufacturer, has to do with all of this. Uh, Mencken tells Kingsley that he can pick up the specs at a Tribeca warehouse on Hudson. Peter leaves to go get a good spot for these pictures, while Foswell calls the police, quote unquote, get a good spot for pictures. The exchange is made, and the police arrive like in fucking seconds immediately. The most prompt response from cops ever. Um, Causing Spider-Man to muse that he might just, make this date after all. just as a helicopter comes in and begins bombarding Kingsley and the police with gunfire and missiles at a fucking warehouse district place. Totally inconspicuous, lots of noise. Spider-Man attempts to subdue the helicopter, but is kicked off by Sable, the aforementioned daughter from the auction, also known as the Silver Sable, in a super cool mercenary outfit. I'm only briefly and like in broad strokes familiar with Silver Sable, so I can't speak to whether or not this is a decent adaptation of her character or not. But she's fun enough in the episode or two that she's in here.
All I know about Silver Sable comes from the Spider-Man PS4 game
Hmm.
that she's in. I have read like no comics that involve Silver Sable. She's not really in this show very much,
Hmm.
but it seems adequate for me. But yeah,
Yes.
they changed her backstory in this show. In the comics, she's like she's like a member of like a royal family or something of some of like an Eastern European country, one of those special Marvel Eastern European countries that only exist in
Hmm.
comic books. And her name's like Silver Sablanova. But they changed it here, and it works. Well, but
Yeah.
my favorite part about Silver Sable in this show is that she has a big like rifle, and you're like, okay, so she's like got a gun, but then it starts shooting staples out of it, like
Yeah.
huge staples.
I have it in my notes in my synopsis that I wrote. The brief parts I have here is she has a Quake nail gun that she fights Peter with.
This gang war, little 3 episode arc just has made me realize that there's not even like any real guns in this show. They're all like weird laser guns, I guess, to make it more kid friendly.
Sometimes they look like they have a silencer on it, kind of. Well, you know what? Now that I think about it, Miles Warren had a straight up fucking revolver in the back of
Yeah,
his pocket.
I
So,
think it's Miles Warren had a straight up revolver, and the guy who killed Uncle Ben, who we will talk about
mhm.
later,
You know,
he had a real gun.
if he had fired that revolver, it probably just would have been a laser revolver too, because he's a science man.
But like the gun that Tombstone gets in episode 10 is like a laser Tommy gun. It's so
Yeah,
funny.
it's very distinctly like, orange cap on the end, family friendly violence, but I'll take it, whatever.
Whatever, who cares?
You know what? They do fire a Gatling gun at Rhino later, and he's the only bulletproof character in the entire fucking thing, so of course you gotta riddle him with bullets too, right?
It works.
Sable leaps from the helicopter and attempts to claim the specs from Kingsley, only for Hammerhead to show up and attempt to do the same. This is, very hot ticket here. Hammerhead proves to be a pretty decent fighter, and we get a fun little nod to the steel plate in his skull. That is his namesake here. Uh, the humor is always good in this show. I was, like I've said in past episodes, I was really apprehensive about going into this, kids show humor in mind, but it's great. They're never over the top to the point where I like go, oh god. There's maybe one or two moments like the Flash Thompson donkey head thing in the earlier episode this season, but it's never gratuitous. I like the steel plate thing. It's funny.
Yeah, the quips have been really fun, especially later on when Spider-Man ends up fighting the Rhino and he throws the cone on his horn. And he's like, "What do I win?"
Yeah, I have a note
It's
about that too. I love it.
I guess it's easier because there's only 2 seasons of this show, but it's kind of remarkable how like consistent the writing in this show has been.
Definitely. For sure. It definitely has that like creator stamp on it where there's a small number of voices here.
Yeah,
As Spider-Man continues to interfere, we get a little revelation that Sable and Hammerhead used to be a romantic item, and they decide to team up again very briefly to kill Spider-Man. Uh, this doesn't work, however, and Spider-Man manages to get the better of them through this fight, only to discover at the end of it, once everybody is subdued, that the case containing the specs is empty, and Kingsley somehow managed to fool everyone and get away with the pertinent data inside.
get tricked.
It does not, however, take long for the Rhino to find him at the parking garage where he is, having been alerted ahead of time to the situation by Doc Ock. Rhino, his motivation here is really cool. He doesn't like the idea of there being more of him. He wants to be the only Rhino, which I don't know. There's something about that I like in this colorful world of Spider-Man villains. He wants to be the only giant gray Rhino man. It's really
I
good.
wonder. I wonder if it's because he just wants to be the strongest guy, or if it's because he doesn't want anybody else to be stuck in a huge suit like he is.
Maybe he's embraced his Rhino identity. I don't know.
I don't know.
Of course, everyone else shows up here to fight. Hammerhead and Sable kind of fight each other for a bit as well. Spider-Man goes after Rhino, and eventually Spider-Man realizes that the Rhino doesn't want the specs leaking. They make that bridge together. We know that, but Spider-Man didn't. They propose a brief team up there, which is incredibly funny to me. This Rhino and this Spider-Man teaming up. It's really solid stuff.
It's funny.
Especially after Flint Marco's kind of heel turn earlier this season. It's refreshing to see other sides of these characters.
Yeah.
Rhino agrees and begins tearing the garage apart in order to bring Hammerhead and Sable down to their level. The data chip thing, whatever it's stored in, it changes hands a few more times over the course of all this, until eventually
And
the Rhino. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
one thing that I found was really funny during this whole squabble over who's going to get the package is when when Sable is like, "I need this for my daddy because he's getting out of prison." Like, I love how like petty the gang war is. It's just about like a bunch of people
Absolutely.
who are like really fucking insecure. They're like, "I want to be the biggest man."
Yeah. If this was the actual level of like high organized crime New York had to deal with, it'd be very very easy to handle. I think
It's so funny.
you just need a decent therapist. That's all. You don't need all those cops.
It's so good.
The Rhino eventually gets control of the situation and gets the MacGuffin and destroys it, crushing it under his giant. Do rhinos have hooves? What the fuck do rhinos have? Feet? I
Feet,
don't know. Uh,
feet.
he then promptly turns on Spider-Man. Like partnership immediately dissolved. I hate Spider-Man. All my homies hate Spider-Man. Sable and Hammerhead get out of Dodge. The place begins to crumble. It's not looking good. Eventually, the garage does collapse on top of both Spider-Man and the Rhino, who cleverly, orchestrated this collapse in the first place. The police arrive and use knockout gas to subdue the Rhino, while Spider-Man makes his way out of the rubble. Another fantastic Captain Stacy, quote-unquote, subtle hint, telling Spider-Man that he tells his students it never hurts to have somebody watch their back. Great bow on the episode there. Minkin, meanwhile, informs Kingsley over the phone that his bid cannot be refunded, as securing the merchandise was his responsibility, so goodbye $500 million. Minkin then turns from there and tells Norman that everything went according to plan. This was all Norman's doing. Norman himself reveals that the chip with everything in it was fake in the first place, apparently. Therefore, he now has $500 million in an unmarked account and the specs to use as he sees fit or don't. So in the end, everything's coming up Norman. It's a real fuck you Norman wins episode. Great stuff.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Peter, now out of his Spider-Man garb, shows up at Liz's place very, very late. Too late to go out even. But Liz is just glad that Peter at least showed up. Um, Peter remarks that he doesn't deserve her and wants to get to the point where he can, and Liz agrees, but says they're going to work on it. Peter leaves, thinking to himself how cool Gwen is before mentally correcting himself to Liz. The poor boy is predictable as ever. And at the Bugle, Jameson is still refusing to run Foswell's story on the auction, preferring to run an additional Spider-Man smear story for teaming up with the Rhino. Uh, Peter arrives and has pictures of everything and convinces Jameson to run the story, ending on what is not only a Norman wins episode but almost a Peter wins episode with the story being run. But yeah, that concludes this first episode of this episode. I liked it a lot. Good stuff.
It's good.
I wish we got more of that kind of Rhino sort of heel turn thing, but I think they did enough of it, especially with as evil as they made Doc Ock in this show.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
just solid stuff. Taking us to episode 9, Probable Cause, which begins in an abandoned warehouse with Shocker fighting two armored foes. Uh, they're kind of in the dark a bit. There's a bit of a fake out where you see one kind of jumping around. You're maybe supposed to presume it's Spider-Man. I don't know. Uh, Shocker at one point refers to one of them as being jumpier than a frog on Texas tarmac, which again, Shocker here is voiced almost essentially like beat for beat. It's the Kyle Katarn voice that this voice actor, whatever his name is that I can't remember, uses. It is so fucking funny to me to hear that in Kyle Katarn's voice that someone is jumpier than a frog on Texas tarmac. I had to make note of that. Um, this is just a training exercise. This fight, as the Tinkerer has provided Montana's teammates, the Enforcers, with their own powered armor to enhance and heighten abilities. Fancy Dan is this version of Ricochet with the speed powers, and Ox is still Ox, still just
Yeah,
Ox.
I like that they've ever since they made the choice to have Montana become the Shocker. It's like, oh, it's fun that they've got the other enforcers in, and yeah, I'm just generally glad that they're sort of getting their dues here because the enforcers
Hmm.
are an underutilized set of Spider-Man villains.
Yeah, I would say that this is arguably the most I don't know, the most widely commercially seen anything that has the enforcers play a part in it.
I'd say that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's the Tinkerer, who's very tangentially part of all this crew here, was in Homecoming, but aside from that, like this is easily the most I don't know well represented, fleshed out version of the team, even if they are rolling characters together. I still like it a lot.
And even then, the Tinkerer wasn't originally associated with the enforcers in the comics, so
Mm. Well, yeah, it's great representation here. It's good to see him. The test is a success, and Tombstone is impressed with how effective the suits are. Uncharacteristically so, I think. He seems really like giddy in this episode, but what can you do? On the other hand, Tombstone is unimpressed with Hammerhead and his performance as of late. He failed to get the Rhino specs. The oil tanker fiasco with Sandman was also directly under Hammerhead's supervision. So Tombstone is deciding to, like, at this point, leave his own right hand man out of the loop, cut him out in little chunks over and over and over, just kind of wear him down. Internal. Uh, I don't know how to phrase it. I like a good villain falling out story. It's good stuff.
yeah.
Spider-Man arrives at Midtown High and just barely avoids being discovered by Hobie Brown, changing behind a dumpster. At the cost
Hobie
of
Brown, who has
falling.
a weird running gag this whole last few episodes, where like nobody lets him talk.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe his voice actor was just sick or something that week, but he
I
just
don't. It's
doesn't
such a
even talk.
weird. It's a. I don't remember where. I think I wrote it down somewhere, but it's like such a weird running gag. But then eventually, it pays off in episode 12.
Hmm. Peter manages to avoid detection and being caught as Spider-Man by flailing and falling back into a pile of trash by the dumpster. Good old
Of course,
character falls in the trash and is stinky and no one wants to sit next to him gag.
I think this is the second time that Peter has fallen into garbage and smells bad, and both school comment on it in this show. This is the second
Yeah.
time they've done it because the first
Yep.
time was when
At the dump.
it was at the dump with the Shocker the first time he fought him.
Hmm. I literally wrote in my notes "Stinky Pete," LOL, and then about 5 seconds later, a character said "Stinky Pete," so that was really, really rewarding for me. That was great.
I do have a note later on where I'm talking about Toy Story 2, but that's for later.
Wow, great. Um, yeah, Peter smells absolutely fucking terrible again, and the entire class at Captain Stacy's seminar is sitting on the opposite side of the room. Captain Stacy reveals that the students are going to be paired up and go on a police ride along, and they're drawing names from a hat to, not. I guess it was maybe the plan already, but it also helps to make Peter feel a little less, no one wants to be with him. Um, Flash is upset that he's been paired with Harry instead of Shashan, who Hobie is paired with. Liz and Gwen get paired up together, as well as Mary Jane and Mark Allen, leaving Peter with Sally Averill. Um, Peter bemoans. Oh,
I
go ahead.
I really like this ride along thing. It's a way to establish character dynamics that we normally wouldn't get to see.
Yeah.
Uh like having more time between Flash and Harry, and
Hmm.
with Peter and Sally, because Peter and Sally have kind of a combative relationship. It's good. I like it. It's a good
Yeah.
plot point.
They're still very much developing Mark Allen as a character at this point too, so it's good opportunity for him. Peter bemoans this turn of events while he's out web slinging later, and notices a hole in the roof of the Metro Bank. Going to investigate, he finds these new enforcers hard at work breaking into the vault. They pretty quickly, not quite subdue, but they kick Peter's ass pretty hard and escape with several bags. Pretty decent Spider-Man defeat. We don't see a lot of these in this show, like not to the point where it's like, okay, damn shit, they got away. Uh, I don't know. I almost like it. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Norman meets with Hammerhead, trying to recruit. Well, rather, Hammerhead wants more supervillains for the big man. Osborn agrees to this, telling him that he's got a new scientist who is a perfect match for the job, saying that he has qualities that are befitting of a leader, and speculating that the big man and maybe Hammerhead himself have those qualities as well. It's nice and subtle at the beginning. Norman's like attempt to sway Hammerhead to, his cause and his crew, but they've run with that a little more later.
Yeah.
Peter shows up late for the ride along, of course, invoking more of Sally's wrath. But meanwhile, MJ and Mark are hitting it off really well in the back of their police cruiser, but it's not really going smoothly at all for Peter. Um, Sally blames Peter for upsetting the social order at Midtown by dating Liz, um, while they observe police looking through the aftermath of everything that happened with Spider Man's fight with the new enforcers. Um, the police find in the middle of all this that a hole was dug adjacent that leads directly into the dry cleaners next door, but was covered up, meaning that the bank may have just been, a cover for that. As it turns out, the new enforcer's actual target was the set of Federal Reserve uniforms they picked up, which they're using to get inside, pretending to bring in a shipment of gold bars. Montana disables the elevator kill switch, and they don their equipment. Uh, I really like this shocker suit. Uh, I don't traditionally like the costume a lot. It looks really goofy and stupid a lot of the time. It's good in this. I like it.
Yeah. The shocker suit is fun to see how people do it, because it is like maybe the dumbest looking suit.
Hmm.
This is coming from a franchise that has a man in a goblin costume. Uh,
Very
but
true.
I like the way it's done here. I like the way it's done in Homecoming as well, with the jacket.
Oh yeah, for
Uh,
sure. The jacket's great.
yeah, it's good.
Homecoming nailed all the costumes.
Oh yeah,
Captain Stacy gets word of what was stolen, while Harry essentially confronts Flash. Harry's frustrated that Flash has been giving him the cold shoulder as of late, which Flash reveals is because Harry left to go to Europe, as we know, leaving Hobie to take his place on the team. And if Harry had been at the championship, Flash figures, he wouldn't have busted his knee making the pass that he made, leading Harry to spill the goblin sauce, so to speak, revealing his globulin green addiction, which doesn't placate Flash but further infuriates him, because the games that Harry played would be null and void if anybody found out about this. That their championship would be rather a disqualification were anybody to find out that their players were juicing, which I think was a good.
juicing on goblin sauce.
And they use that phrase on the show too. They say, "Oh, you were juicing," and I'm like, is that a word that's ever been said on a children's cartoon before in that context? That's like a real specific thing. I wonder.
It's it's like you saying it. It's very funny.
Yeah, it's played just unstraight enough to be good. I can't believe you were juicing with goblin juice.
I
Oh,
can't believe
whoa.
you were drinking Ecto Cooler and it made you strong or whatever. And then later on, when we get to the 80 million different revelations that happen on the final episode of the show, uh, the actual usage of goblin sauce, it makes all this shit even funnier.
Yeah, for real. The new enforcers have gotten past security and are descending in the elevator. There's a great little moment where Ox is humming the theme song to the show and a little head nod, I guess. Uh, that happens to me all the fucking time. I've said that before. I've been phoneless for the last few weeks, so I haven't been able to listen to music at work. And more often than not, I found myself just humming the theme song to this because I hear it like a lot. It's great.
It's
Love it.
good.
Outside, Captain Stacy is telling Sally and Peter that they're going to be safe in the police's mobile command center, but Peter convinces the captain to let him snap some pictures from behind a van. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The enforcers enter the gold vaults, and Shocker blasts the elevator shaft to prevent anybody from coming down after them. It's completely incapacitated. Nobody will be able to clear it for presumably weeks, is what a character says later. They begin blasting open a separate escape route, and Ox and Ricochet begin preparing to move the gold. Spider-Man arrives on the scene and lets Captain Stacy know that Shocker and his gang are behind the ongoing robbery, and forces the elevator doors open himself. Unfortunately for Spider-Man, the enforcers see him coming, courtesy of a rerouted security feed. So they launch Ricochet up the elevator shaft, Ox and Shocker do. Uh, and he kind of just bats Spider-Man around for a while. It's like fucking Half-Life physics. It's really funny.
Yeah.
Um, Spider-Man manages to shake him off eventually, though, and parachutes down the rest of the way on his webbing, which is a thing they like to do with him a lot this second half of the season. We see a lot of web parachutes for some reason, an
It's
idea they
fun.
were saving. That's fun. Yeah, it's good. Uh, Ricochet manages to get in a sneak attack, however, alerting Shocker to Spider-Man's presence. Um, while Ox loads up a subway car that is serving as their getaway, Shocker and Ricochet keep Spider-Man busy. Another great fight sequence. Like I've said before, the fights this season are all about the set pieces, and this is a really fun one.
Yeah.
With the piles of gold bars and everything, it's just very comic book.
They're just
Um,
yeah, all the sound design especially really is also really good when they're clanging around the gold bars.
mhm. um, Buried under a pile of gold bars and also just subdued for a bit. Spider-Man is. Shocker decides that it is too risky to stick around. They're not gonna get the full take they were hoping for. They're just gonna take the money they have and run, not lose the big man's take. uh Spider-Man follows them out via this subway car that they're using, and continues fighting them until he's again beaten just senseless. uh, this is all just a ploy, though, as Spider-Man manages to catch them by surprise and toss the card of gold out the front window, causing the car to tip over. The enforcers manage to get away unscratched, and with a few of the bars, but not nearly with what they would have gotten otherwise.
I don't
Uh,
remember when it exactly happens in this fight, but Peter is like talking like I think it's when they're like getting away on the train and Peter has to catch up to them where he's like, "Oh, what a revoltant development." And I love that he says that because that's an old catchphrase that the Thing would say in the old
hmm,
Lee Kirby Fantastic Four comics.
that's absolutely a thing you would catch, yeah.
That's I think that's really really fun. It's like, "Hey, I know that."
They know who they're making this for, I guess, outside of 12-year-olds.
I guess so.
It's a very Lex thing to recognize. That's great.
12-year-olds and me.
There's a Venn diagram there somewhere, yeah. Me too. Uh, Topside, Sally is complaining about having to wait before the van is ambushed by Shocker. Shocker gets cover for Ox and Ricochet to arrive as well, but there's quickly another embroiled fight with Spider-Man. During this fight, the van where Peter kept his camera is blown up, leaving Sally to believe that Peter has died, which is like the third or fourth, oh no, Peter's dead moment of the series.
It just keeps
Uh,
happening.
Poor fucking kid. Shocker is about to finish off Spider-Man before the gauntlets briefly malfunction, and he decides to take care of the proverbial bug another time, jumping into another getaway car with the rest of the enforcers, only for it to be hit by a spike trap set by Hammerhead's driver, no less, leaving them in the hands of the police. Sally is convinced that Peter was blown to bits after no body is found, but Peter does show up, as he does, claiming that he went to the bathroom.
Had to take a
It's a
shit.
stupid lie, but it works. This infuriates Sally because she had gotten so worried over Peter being dead. But you know how it is. At Midtown, Principal Davis removes the championship trophy, as it is now under review. And at the beginning, Harry is blamed for this, but Flash very quickly comes forward to reveal that he was the one who spilled the news about Harry juicing because he didn't want to have a dishonest win. That's who Flash is. This alienates Flash's friends for the time being, but it finally wins Flash the attention of Shashan Wen, much to his elation. Harry, however, is far worse off, or so we think, as he opens up his stash of globulin green in his bedroom, capping the episode off with a super cool goblin shadow on the wall. Oh, the boy may be drinking his juice.
Back on the juice.
Which takes us to the 10th episode of this season, Gangland, which I think possibly may be my favorite episode of the show. I'll have to think about that a little more, I
Damn.
think. This one's fun. It's pretty good.
It is.
It is Valentine's Day, and yet another great passage of time moment. Every few episodes, it feels like we've moved along another month or two. You know, from Halloween to Christmas to Valentine's Day being another little 2-month movement.
Yep.
And opposing factions of New York's criminal underground are not really feeling the lovey-dovey spirit. Criminals from both Tombstone's and Silvermane's mobs are at war with each other in a lot of more, crazy set piece stuff at a flower shop. A fight that Spider-Man breaks up, forgetting to pick up flowers for his dinner date with Liz. Despite this, Harry is glad to see Peter show up at Jazzy Gianni's. I remembered to get the name of this one down because names in these places are always so fucking dumb.
I never paid attention to it, but that's a great name.
And both are surprised to see Gwen Stacy step out of a cab with Mary Jane and with a new look. Liz, however, is not impressed. This is, I say this is a favorite episode. There's a bit of borderline character assassination with Gwen from here, where they very much pull the "wow, they did a makeover and she doesn't wear her glasses anymore and now she's pretty" thing, and it's like, okay,
I don't know if it's I don't know if I'd go so far as to call it character assassination because Gwen still acts the same. She
yeah,
doesn't. It's not like It's not like Mary Jane Watson in Spider-Man 2, where they completely fuck her
for
up
sure, for
tremendously.
sure. It's not so
But
severe, yeah, but it
it's
kind of it rubs me the wrong way a little bit with how much they went out of their way to be like, look, Gwen is smart in this one, and that's like, well, we can't have her have glasses.
it's it's like that classic. It's that classic trope of it's like what's that movie? She's All That. It's like
Yeah,
that.
classic, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of goofy to me, but it's not such a
Yeah,
great example.
it's goofy, but it's not anything that I thought was particularly terrible.
Elsewhere, J. Jonah Jameson is being dragged to the opera house by his wife. More classic sitcom type shit, as she demands a romantic evening or else. They're there to see Rigoletto, and as it's warming up, a meeting of the minds of evil is taking place high above the audience. In one corner sits Tombstone, the reigning big man of crime, who wants to keep the criminal element as he currently runs it. He's not really wanting to give up his seat. Across from him is Silvio Silvermane Manfredi, who I always love to read his name like a wrestler. Silvio Silvermane Manfredi, who
It's a good name.
intends to return things to his old-fashioned management style. And rounding out this meeting is Dr. Octopus, the master planner, the third
Dr.
big man here.
Octopus.
Is that what I said? Jesus.
Yeah.
I picked a great time to scratch my lip. The master planner, as he's known, who feels that the supervillains and the science that he's providing are the future of New York's underworld. They're accompanied by their respective subordinates, Hammerhead, Silver Sable, and the Vulture, wearing a fucking top hat, which I thought was great. It was
Looking
very funny to
stylish.
me. Uh, it cracked me up, but it's the drip. The trio begin their meeting to get things hashed out and discussed. Meanwhile, at Jazzy Gianni's, Peter's group is interrupted by Flash Thompson and his posse showing up, uh, crowding in to share the table. Flash takes this opportunity to ask Peter a favor. He wants Peter to alert him to not do anything stupid around Shashan, which they establish with a friendly kicking game, elbowing game under the table.
And one thing
Hurt
this is like a really small thing, but like when everybody crowds into the booth, I don't remember who says it, but like you just hear somebody say, "Stop complaining, this is fun."
Yeah, I saw that in the subtitles when I was watching. That was good. Um, yeah, I love a good everybody's at the restaurant scene with all of this, classic Spider-Man type stuff. Um, Back at the opera, Tombstone, Silvermane, and Doc Ock are sharing pleasantries, but the situation quickly goes violent when they begin asking each other who set this summit up. Hammerhead knocks out Sable and the Vulture and throws a machine gun to Tombstone, the aforementioned laser RCW, I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
Doc Ock fights back with, of course, his tentacles, while Silvermane pulls his own ace in the hole with a suit of powered armor that I note here looks even more Buzz Lightyear than Colonel Jupiter did.
Where Doc Ock in this scene says like the funniest line I think he's ever said, or he's like, "What is this treachery?" He almost sounded like
Yeah,
the Duke of Lemon Grab. It was so
yeah,
funny.
he really does. God,
He's
it's
very
great.
upset about the whole situation.
As the fight tears up the room, it eventually spills into the lobby. Uh, while Hammerhead just helps himself to the meal before him, dreaming of becoming the new big man once these three take each other out. Meanwhile, the dinner date continues, but Peter is suddenly called by Robbie at the Bugle. Uh, Patch
And
is. Oh, go ahead.
and one thing here, I'd like I can't believe it took me this long to notice. But I realized that Peter's ringtone is the Itsy Bitsy Spider.
Yeah, that is really good. I don't think I caught that at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's just the Itsy Bitsy Spider sped up, and I'm like, those motherfuckers.
It's and no one questioned that when Peter was supposedly Spider-Man, but okay.
Ding 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 ding.
I guess
He
a
just
lot of
I
people
guess he
would
just
have
likes
that
the song.
ringtone. I guess so, yeah. Good thing that's the first time that's ever been used in Spider-Man media, and it's never been used since. Patch is undercover at the Opera House to spy on the villains, and needs someone for photos. So Peter is forced to bail on the date for work. He very briefly, he only has so much time to tell Liz goodbye, except the goodbye is more aimed at Gwen, really ruffling Liz's feathers, rightfully so. When he shows up as Spider Man, the three villains converge on him, as well as still fighting each other. Um, and they attempt to call allies for backup, but are met with interference at every turn. Their communications are jammed, and they're not able to make those calls. Back at Jazzy Gianni's, Liz's brother Mark is seen speaking with a mysterious, suspicious mustached man. He suddenly buys a basket of roses for the table with a suspicious pile of money. Liz's expression brings a frown to Mark's face during this. Meanwhile, Harry is upset that Peter bailed on the date, and Flash is still doing his damnedest to not look like an idiot around Shashan. Fun gag where Kenny hits him despite not having a reason, just saying it looked fun when Peter did it.
Flash is
Eventually,
trying.
he's really trying. It's admirable. It's a certified Flash moment in a good way this time.
I do
Uh,
appreciate it.
Eventually, Shashan explains to Flash that she likes him simply for his being honest. And the two share a dance, which is nice. Spidey is still struggling to keep up with the villains infighting and keep them fighting each other, um, and also working double time to prevent any collateral damage with innocent bystanders. Uh, Doc Ock manages to pin Spidey down and suggests to Tombstone and Silvermane that they should work together to ensure the death of Spider-Man. However, Tombstone refuses, saying he can't afford to be seen working with criminals in public, which, he just about forgot up to this point, I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
Silvermane has no such issue. and attempts to kill Spider-Man in a power-armored bear hug. But Spidey removes him from the fight by noticing that the suit runs on hydraulics and just really quickly yanking those out. Like, quick, easy done. Fuck you. Upstairs.
What's it's like all it reminds me of is that a Tumblr post I saw. Like I think I reblogged it from you not too long ago, like a day or two ago. Yeah, here it is. I get into a fight with a steampunk cosplayer and use a wrench to tighten the gears on his outfit until he overheats and explodes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty much what Spider-Man does.
That's that. Yeah, that's it. He did it.
Upstairs, Sable has quickly recovered the situation and demands Hammerhead tell her who's jamming the phones, but Hammerhead just shrugs and walks away. I really love Hammerhead in these last few episodes as he's like getting his own identity with everything that's going on with him and his rise to self-sufficiency.
He just wants to go evil mode. And one thing I didn't talk about earlier is that a lot of these fight scenes they have like opera playing in the background, and I just wrote down that opera makes every fight scene better.
No witnesses down here. I assume you remember our last physical encounter.
Painfully. But I told you then, I don't look the other way.
Yeah, it really does. It does a lot of favors here.
Oh yeah.
Doc Ock eventually tears a chunk of the floor out, causing him, Spider-Man, and Tombstone to collapse into a utility tunnel. Spider-Man takes advantage of this to knock out Doc Ock and pull his harness's battery. All that remains is Tombstone, who now has no issues beating Spider-Man to a pulp now that nobody is watching. Very brutal fight from here. Great little tunnel set piece. Love a classic hallway fight. But Spider-Man emerges victorious and sees to it that all three of these crime lords are taken away, including Tombstone, before returning to Liz and her home. However, Mark refuses to let Peter see Liz out of anger for his abandoning her, but more so because he believes that Peter has feelings for Gwen, which he does.
He does.
He warns him that Liz is too good to be considered second place in a relationship, and too good for Peter to be in a relationship with her before slamming the door in his face. So he might have finally taken down Tombstone, but he also probably doesn't have a girlfriend anymore. What can you do?
Yeah. And I want to say this right now before we get into the next episode. I don't like Mark as a character. He kind of is boring and annoys me. And the next episode is probably my least favorite in the entire show. Not because it's bad, it's just kind of the most average. It's like,
there's only so much, time left here, and it feels wasted on Mark, I will say. It's an interesting idea, bridging, all those multiple characters to create him as he is. But I just don't give enough of a shit about Molten Man or him to care.
I can imagine a world where it's done well, but I don't want to like shit on anybody in particular. But like I feel like I don't know if it was the direction or just the voice actor for Mark. He just feels he has this sort of like sleepy demeanor about him. Like very much reminds me of Tobey Maguire, where he's like, "I'll leave my sister alone." It's like, come on, we gotta get some energy in here. Let's go.
It does come across like that a lot, yeah. The episode is finding its conclusion here. The next day at the police precinct, Spider-Man is furious to know that Tombstone made it out on bail like immediately after his arrest. Captain Stacy assures him that Tombstone is under very close and very constant surveillance, making it that much harder to continue his criminal activities, which placates Peter for the most part. But Stacy now warns there is a power vacuum in the criminal underworld, and that nature abhors a vacuum. Indeed, yeah, Tombstone has already been forced to yield to the new big man of crime, the Green Goblin.
Oh yeah, Gobby moment.
Who is just straight up like, yeah, I'm the new big man. What are you gonna do about it? Fight me.
I don't care.
Great ending here. Just solid stuff. Takes us into the next one. We're halfway through here. Moving on to episode 11, Subtext, which opens at Montana's Big Sky Billiards Room. It's one of those, not necessarily like preamble episodes. We're right into the thick of it. Spider-Man is face to face with the Molten Man. His skin covered in a superheated metallic alloy. It's pretty intense. He's setting everything he touches ablaze, and Spider-Man can't lay any punches on him because of the heat. Spider-Man gets thrown across the burning room and notices Mary Jane and Liz Allen hiding behind a counter. Great. One more thing to worry about. And we get a flashback from there, some context to catch us up to this moment. It's earlier that day, and Peter is waiting to meet Liz by a fountain and apologize for his lackluster performance as a boyfriend. Liz has her own set of problems, as her brother Mark has not been seen in a few days, and she's worried that he's gotten himself into trouble again. We know that Mark was a juvie guy, and he's back there, but we haven't gotten much back from there, but we haven't gotten a lot of additional context.
He also has a somewhat of a relationship with Mary Jane.
Yeah, they've become very close, especially after the police ride along. They grew a lot closer there.
Yep.
Liz explains that Mark is a habitual gambler with a bad problem with it, and is frequently in debt to his bookkeeper Blackie Gaxton. Liz explains that he's often in debt to his bookkeeper, and often ends up getting into more trouble when he resorts to crime to repay his loans. Harry chimes in and explains that Mark can only stop his addiction when he's ready, and relates it to his consumption of the green. But Peter decides to turn to Spider-Man as a first step to resolve this. At the Big Sky, Mark is indeed in deep with Blackie, but is confident he's going to win it all back on his next racehorse, because it's always a lock with him. Suddenly, the Green Goblin flies in to announce his new ownership of this location as the big man. There's some fighting that ensues, but Blackie, recognizes, okay, all right, I'm not going to fight the Goblin Man. He's the big man. What's up? And the Goblin approaches him with a favor that Blackie is eager to oblige, saying he's got the perfect sap for the job.
I'm trying to remember, when does I don't remember when this happens. I just all I have written down is I think it's the Goblin trying to talk to somebody, and he's like, I need.
I think that is this moment, to which Blackie replies that he has the perfect sap for the job.
God, fuck that! It's just so funny when he goes, I need.
Yeah, it's Looney Tunes shit. It's great though. Blackie takes Mark to an abandoned police station, which has been converted into a laboratory run by Norman Osborn and Dr. Miles Warren, the bastards of science.
The bastards of science.
I had that written down. That's what I like calling them.
Going fucking evil mode.
Oh, completely, yeah. Having studied the subdermal process that created the Sandman, Dr. Warren claims to have perfected it through nanotechnology, and Blackie has offered up Mark as a test subject in exchange for striking his debts. Mark agrees.
Not only striking his debts, but also giving him $100.
Yeah,
that's so funny. Like
$100 voucher.
Like he does this and he gets like fucked up by the science experiment, and he's like, and then
like he's not gonna go.
And then Blackie just gives him $100, like, hey, go buy yourself something nice, toots.
Get out of here.
Yeah, gabagoo. It's so funny.
Fucking love Miles Morton in this show. The process succeeds and leaves Mark with an indestructible subdermal coating on his skin, which he can supposedly mentally switch on and off at will. With his new powers, no debt, and his hot $100 bill, Mark heads to the racetrack in hopes of continuing his hot streak, unaware that Spider-Man is watching from afar. His horse comes in last, and Mark is so distraught that his armor seemingly activates against his will, and superheats him and the area until he's setting fire to the track and the surroundings. Spider-Man is forced to intervene, and attempts to get him, but the molten man overpowers him easily and escapes.
We also are in that scene, we get to see the Green Goblin in full costume, in a trench coat, walking around the racetrack, which is
Yeah,
maybe the funniest image in the world.
he looks like the fucking the Flasher Gremlin. Is
Oh
what
my
he looks
God.
like
It's
with a
so
hat on.
it's it's incredibly dumb, and I love it.
hmm Also, I think if I saw Spider-Man at the racetrack, I would think like, oh, okay, Spider-Man has a gambling addiction. We can figure out who he is, like reverse engineer it from there.
I've got it. He's Mark Allen.
Have you ever seen Spider-Man and Molten Man at the same place at the same time? Didn't think so.
Didn't think so.
Meanwhile, MJ has come over to visit Liz. Liz believes that she's trying to drive a wedge between her and Peter, but MJ explains it's not at all like that, and that her main concern is that she knows Mark is gambling again, and Liz asks that she be taken to him. Mark immediately returns to Blackie at the Big Sky, but with the Green Goblin now also present. The Goblin explains that Mark was never in control of his armor, but was being manipulated through a remote control to think that he was. Uh, Jumping on Mark's despair, the Goblin agrees to relinquish control over him if he eliminates Spider-Man, a bet that he can't refuse. And as if on cue, Spider-Man arrives himself at the Big Sky, and Mark immediately tears through the bar to get at him just as MJ and Liz arrive and kind of recognize him. The fight is now caught up to the cold open flashback sequence, with Mark burning the bar down and tearing it to pieces. Spider-Man is just barely able to get the girls and Blackie back to safety. Yet another Spider-Man dudes rock rescue the two girls moment.
Oh, yeah.
Liz and Mary Jane attempt to talk to Mark and get him to stop gambling with his life during the school play. Great little heart tug moment with Mark not being there, operating the lights.
Yeah, as much as I have harped on this episode, the endings bit here with these really good emotional moments, and the bit with Dr. Connors and Miles Warren that we're going to talk about really quick.
Yeah,
Those bits are good.
yeah. It's one of the more solid parts of the episode. And like you mentioned, elsewhere at ESU, Dr. Connors is he's discovered Dr. Warren's notes on the subdermal armor and is appalled. He threatens to go to the board with the evidence that he has here, and Warren calmly informs Connors that the board is already in his favor, and not so subtly brings up the damning evidence of Connors' transformation to the lizard, telling him to keep his forked tongue quiet.
God damn, he's so fucking evil. I love it.
Yeah, closing the book on this episode. So fucking evil. It's just preposterous. Takes us to our penultimate episode, opening night. Norman Osborn has invited Captain Stacy and J. Jonah Jameson to the Vault, a new wing of Rikers Island Prison designed to contain the most dangerous of supervillains. And to prove it as inescapable, Osborn has hired/arrested Spider-Man as a special guest to test this boast. Meanwhile, Black Cat is arriving in disguise to do something she never, thought she might have to do, break into a prison while Spider-Man is trying to break out. It's a great setup for an episode. Thinking about it, this could also be my favorite episode. It's definitely going to be an episode from the second season. This one is a lot of fun. It's great. But we're going to get into how great it is very shortly. Back at school, the production of A Midsummer Night's Dream is beginning, or rather getting ready to begin. The cast is nervous, and the director, Mr. Devereaux, is super panicked because Harry Osborn has gone missing. Gwen has not seen him all day. Nobody has. Liz is also concerned for Peter, as she wants him to sit with her parents in place of Mark, and Peter promised he would be there. More classic Spider-Man promising he'll be at a play. When the director announces that his own plan to play Harry's role of Puck, Glory instead suggests Hobie Brown, who knows the role perfectly, despite being mute.
Yeah, this whole play thing is really fun, and it's another way for Peter to have a sort of struggle between his superhero and his personal life. But part of me wonders, like, why did he agree to go be in this prison thing when he has to go to the show as well? He's like, can he just be like, can we do this like tomorrow? I can't, I'm busy tonight.
Maybe Norman offered to pay him. I don't know. I would think too, Spider-Man would maybe want to like know how secure this thing is. But yeah, the timing sucks.
It is very bad.
Back at the vault, Black Cat is beginning her infiltration, while Jameson is gleefully teasing Spider-Man over his imprisonment. Norman, meanwhile, excuses himself to attend to personal matters, whatever those may be. Spidey suddenly blinds the camera with webs, which triggers knockout gas in his cell. He manages to cocoon the gas in a mound of webbing that looks like a big egg sack. It's really fucked up. It's really cool.
Yeah.
The guards arrive and see nothing but web inside the cell from a detonated webbing thing, a little cartridge Peter like plugged a live wire into. Great. Guards arrive, see nothing but webs, no Spider-Man. They poke the big fat ball of web, which doses them with the gas that had been blocked off, giving Spider-Man his escape route. The security staff immediately go into lockdown procedures, but nothing is responding, and all of the doors are sealing shut on the guards. High above Rikers, the Green Goblin is watching the chaos unfold as he hacks into the prison's systems. Really, really good stuff. Escaping the vault, with the battle only halfway over, Spider-Man arrives to the main prison wing of Rikers, where all of the crooks, thugs, hoods, and various lowlifes that he has put away are stewing in their cells. The enforcers are there, Silvermane, Quentin Beck, a real who's who of villains that have appeared on this show. Suddenly, mid-boast, the cell doors fly open and allow said crooks to gang up on our wall crawler, just as the curtain is rising at Midtown. This is just absolutely classic Spider-Man stuff. This whole setup, the scenario here, this feels so on brand. This entire episode, it's really good.
Shit is getting complicated.
Spider-Man does his best to survive the onslaught of thugs, including Quentin Beck, when he turns out to be a Mysterio. Is this the bot, or is this another bot that was arrested? Yeah.
I literally wrote in my notes, I love that Mysterio keeps getting away with putting robots in prison. Like, they keep falling for it. Like, when are they going to realize that maybe they should, like, double check if it's a robot?
Yeah, the first one, we joked about having to be realistic everywhere, but like how much more realistic is the second one have to be, right?
He just keeps getting away with it.
There's got to be a point where you just eventually have to like shoot the guy in the foot to make sure he's a person before you arrest him. Something.
I will accept police brutality for this one moment.
Is that really Mysterio? Punch him and see if he bleeds. I don't know.
Yeah. Punch him a little bit. If metal plates fall off of him and he morphs into a Mysterio, we've got our answer.
Suddenly, in the nick of time to aid Spider-Man, Black Cat appears and distracts the criminals long enough for Spider-Man to catch his breath. The pair slip into some cells to evade the mob, rather a cell, which is occupied by a single tenant hidden in the shadows that we're not properly introduced to yet. Oh my god, I wanted to mention, I have it in my notes here before we get too far away from this, while they're fighting the Mysterio bot. Jonah mentions that he loves the gremlins that he throws. I thought that was worth mentioning. I don't know. I think it's really funny that Jonah's infatuated with Mysterio's robot gremlins.
He's just enamored by little creatures.
They're great. The play is now in full swing at Midtown, with Hobie now on stage as Puck, reciting his lines. While this happens, the Goblin releases Rhino and Molten Man to increase the odds against Spider-Man. Back in the cell, Black Cat introduces Spidey to its occupant, Walter Hardy, the original cat burglar, and her father, which quietly drives Spider-Man into shock, seeing the criminal who killed his Uncle Ben that fateful night at the arena. Fucking incredible reveal, by the way.
It's crazy. That obviously that's not a thing that happens in the comics. They added this for the show. But it's really interesting to have him sort of grapple with the fact that Black Cat wants to break him out of prison, but Peter's like, "Fuck this guy. This guy's not getting out."
Yeah,
It's really really well done.
and it's some of the most emotional weight that a problem has had for this Peter so far. A lot of this show has just been, oh, gotta stop the gang war. Oh, gotta stop the big man. There haven't been a lot of personal stakes outside of, oh, gotta save Gwen. And this is like some of the most personal these stakes get.
Oh yeah.
It's really great. All of this being said, there's a fun thing happening at the play too, where the costumes are like Spider-Man themed, kind of. The coloration on Glory's costume is very Spider-Man. The pup costume is very Green Goblin, which leads
Yeah,
me to label this
it's really weird. I don't know anything particularly about Midsummer Night's Dream. It's not one of the Shakespeare plays that I've read or seen.
Mhm.
I don't know why they decided to do that. It's kind of weird.
It's a better Spider-Man play than Turn Off the Dark, I imagine.
Well, who knows? We're gonna fucking get to Turn Off the Dark later this season.
We sure are.
I'm so God.
It's gonna be great.
Everyone who is listening to this right now, I've said this before, you are not ready for what is going to happen in the Turn Off the Dark episode. When I said that last time, Alex didn't know what we were talking about, but we've got some shit.
I've heard some rumblings, yeah.
Our special guest for that episode has some insane shit planned.
I'm really looking forward to it. The trio of Walter, Felicia, and Peter make their escape through the vents, just as Rhino arrives to tear down their hiding spot. Black Cat explains that she wants to break Walter out, Peter's having absolutely none of it, and Walter is left feeling very uncomfortable. That feeling becomes mutual when Molten Man sends fire through the vents. Great little Die Hard type sweat out the vents thing. Meanwhile, Flash is on stage, and though his acting skills are weak, being with Shashan makes it worthwhile for him personally. Great little Flash moment, which, of course, we cut back to the main action with Spidey, Black Cat, and Walter, who escape into the vault's gas storage chamber. Black Cat explains that the criminals can be stopped if someone is willing to stay behind and turn the gas vents on manually. She goads Spidey into being that someone, of course, so he heads back to lure the villains into the chamber. Along the way, he removes the Mysterio robot from the field by luring Molten Man into blasting it, which I thought was a fun, neat little, creative ingenuity moment there.
Yeah, he does it, and then whenever he tells him like, I bet you can't hit me," and he's like, "I'll take that bet," and he puts the Mysterio robot in front of him, and then Spider-Man swings off and yells "sucker," which is so funny.
It's really great. Yeah,
he's like, "You fucking idiot!"
Get owned. But yeah, he screams "sucker," swings off. Great moment, love it. Doesn't happen enough. You would think that would happen a lot more. Once everybody is gathered in the chamber, the gas is turned on by Walter, surprisingly, allowing Spidey and Black Cat to escape while he and the other prisoners are left trapped. Black Cat leaves in anger, with her thoughts flashing back to a mere moment before. I thought I missed something at one point watching this before, like they go to this flashback thing. I was very confused, but it's great from here. Walter explains to her and Spider-Man that as the cat burglar, he never hurt anybody, and made it a point to never hurt anybody, but began carrying a gun for protection as his physical skills faded with age. The killing of Ben Parker was not something he enjoyed. It was not intentional, I believe he says, right? Was it also an accident?
He never meant for it to happen.
And he's regretted it every single day since it happened. So he chooses to stay behind and remain in prison because it's where he belongs to atone for his sins. And I want to say he says the name Ben Parker of his own volition. It's not even a thing Spider-Man has to like goad out of him, which is really interesting to me. But yeah, rather than accept her father's fate, Black Cat instead blames Spider-Man and swears that she'll never forgive him, exiting the scene and the show. She's not the only one pissed. The Green Goblin is furious with Spider-Man's continued survival and attacks on him directly. So he decides to pay him a visit. Immediately, Spidey's thoughts turn to the terrifying idea that Harry is back on the Globulin Green and is seeking revenge as his alter ego. Uh, Order is restored at Rikers, with the scene fading once more to Midtown, where Hobie, as Puck, delivers the final scene to a standing ovation. Really, really solid episode.
Oh yeah.
Just really, Walter Hardy's not a character I'm terribly familiar with, but incorporating him as this role instead of just the nameless burglar that kills Uncle Ben knocked it out of the park. Really good stuff.
Now, I've said before, specifically in our Spider-Man 3 episode, that I'm normally not terribly a huge fan of when they make somebody the person who killed Uncle Ben like a character that we already know, like what they did with
Yeah.
Sandman in Spider-Man 3.
hmm
But this time it works as a way to get this emotional moment out here in the prison. It's one of the times that's really well done.
hmm Yeah, I don't have much more to say about it. You pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's
Yeah.
it's not often done well, and it was done great here. Which takes us, lo and behold, we've reached the end, dear listener. We are at season 2, episode 13, the final curtain.
The final
Uh,
episode of the show where 80 million different things happen like all at once, and then the show is
Yeah.
over forever.
Yeah, it does have a bit of a jarring ending. It made me sit up and go, "What? Huh?"
This is the most
But
like batshit ending to a television show I've seen in a long time.
yeah, I definitely think a third season might have ironed this out a bit more. But
Part of
here
me,
we,
part of me wonders because they had to move. We might as well get real quick into the history of what happened to this show before we
yes,
go
yes,
on to this. So this show was originally created by Sony Television. It was on Kids WB and then later the CW before it was then moved to Disney Channel for the second season. Because while they were in the middle of production on this show, Disney ended up buying Marvel,
yes,
uh, and that fucking shook up everything related to the rights. Especially since, as we remember from way back in last season, we talked about how Marvel went bankrupt in the '90s and sold off a bunch of rights to their characters. Blah 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 blah. That's why Spider-Man's movie rights are so tied up with shit, and that's what happened here. Uh, so when Marvel got the TV rights to Spider-Man back from Sony, there was a shakeup, and it ended up canceling the show, and Marvel decided to make Ultimate Spider-Man with Drake Bell, the next cartoon.
yeah,
Noted sex pest Drake Bell. But here it because that shift had taken place in between season 1 and 2. Part of me wonders if they knew this was going to be the last episode, and they were like, fuck, let's just scramble and get all this shit done as much as we can. And they just crammed it all into the last episode.
that's definitely a possibility. Yeah,
Normally, I would say that this is a problem, but I feel like that it's like, it's fucking insane enough that I'm like, sure, why not? And I mean, we'll talk about it later on in the episode, so let's just get back into it.
yep. We begin with Spider-Man in a heated battle with a bunch of the Green Goblin's pumpkin-headed henchmen that he's hired.
Wearing their
Over some
Halloween 3
time.
masks.
Yeah, their silver shamrock ass. They're raiding a warehouse for weapons. Spidey captures the majority of them in a big dangly web trap and threatens some info out of them in a very grown-up Spider-Man moment. Looking for where the goblin's lair is. But nobody can tell him. One of the pumpkin-headed villains is also escaping with a truck full of guns. All Spidey knows is that he needs to save his missing friend Harry Osborn from his own globulin green-induced insanity. So, back home, Peter apologizes to Liz for missing the school play due to work. Liz tries to be supportive and subtly hints that Peter's emotions for her are actually meant for someone else, like Gwen. Peter's love life issues are interrupted by an urgent call from Gwen to meet her at her house. Harry's with her, and he needs help. which, Peter was kind of expecting.
Yeah.
Peter arrives to find Harry sitting on the couch. Harry briefly explains, retrospectively, his addiction to globulin green to Peter and Gwen, and how he believed himself to be the Green Goblin as the result of the chemical warping his mind, a fact that Peter has to play some surprise at. However, Harry now claims that the Green Goblin is a separate person from himself who had kidnapped him, explaining his recent absence. Harry is encouraged by Gwen to confront his father Norman for help. As Harry leaves, Peter and Gwen spend some time recognizing their feelings for each other, deciding to be together, but recognizing their need to end their current relationships, unaware that Harry is outside and listening with a very evil expression for a little boy, even a little boy going through this.
Yeah, Harry was prepared to do the most devilish thing in this entire television program.
Mm-hmm.
And that's saying something.
Yeah, for real. Back at the Osborn home, Harry begs Norman for help, but is not getting very far. Spider-Man, however, shows up and accuses Norman of being the Green Goblin, recalling last Halloween when he saw Norman exit a secret passage in the home, which
exit his secret jerk-off dungeon that we talked about a couple episodes ago.
the Norman Osborn Masturbatorium.
Yes.
Which turns out to be nothing but a wine cellar, not a supervillain lair. Norman calmly defends himself by stating that he was also present when the Goblin stole the inhibitor prototype device from Oscorp and walks away. Fuck you.
He's like, you're wrong, dipshit.
The balcony suddenly explodes, and the Goblin flies in with finger zappers blazing, and I just cannot tell you how happy I am that he uses these things as often as he does in this show. It's so fucking cool.
I love the finger zappers.
After a short fight that ends with the Goblin escaping again, Spidey confronts the Osborns again. Now very confused because both of his prime suspects are innocent. Spidey asks them if there's anybody else that has access to globulin green. Norman mentions Donald Mencken, an employee at Oscorp, who has conveniently vanished with his company records erased. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I really actually thought that this twist was going to go somewhere, that Mencken actually was going to be the Goblin, and I was actually really disappointed for a few minutes. Like, I bought it. I fully admit that I'm stupid, and this show has tricked me more than once, but I actually thought they were going to fake us out with Mencken being the Goblin, which was like, oh, man.
This show, like, normally if in a lot of other shows, if they tried to do this whole who's the Green Goblin thing, like just play it out for that long, it would get really tedious and like super boring. But I got to give it up to the writers for somehow pulling this shit off, because like right at the end when they do have the reveal later on, I was like, what the fuck? Like I was like so blinded by it that I didn't even expect what was going to happen. I was like, what?
Yeah, for sure. It's a hell of a last episode. I don't know if it's one of the best last episodes or one of the worst, but it's great. It's great.
It's insane. It's insane.
It's spectacular. God damn it. The next day at Midtown, Peter's feelings for Gwen are only growing deeper, and he's ultimately forced to sever his relationship with Liz, who publicly makes a show of the breakup to save face with her popular peers, but privately goes around the corner to hide and weep at her dissolution with Peter. Not great stuff, but, gotta have your first breakup at some point. At ESU, Peter and Gwen meet with Dr. Kurt Connors, but are saddened to learn that he and his family are moving to Florida. Yay, Florida lizard connection. And his research is now in the hands of Dr. Miles Warren, who Kurt's wife Martha does not trust in the slightest. The Florida thing, had that been brought up previously in the show? Or am I just
they don't even say that they're moving to Florida until like the end of the episode. They just say that they're leaving ESU and then they're leaving New York. I mean, I assume that they were going to move to Florida because that's where the Connors usually are based in the comics. But
right. I think they may have said it out loud. I have it written in my notes, but I could be wrong. Either way, it's a neat place for them to end up, even if it's not specifically Florida. Out of state, boo-hoo. The dissolution of the lab actually hit me harder than any other like death or fake out or oh no, that's so sad. Any of the Doc Ock shit. Kirk Connors just wanted to be a fucking doctor again.
He just wanted to have his normal life, and then fucking Miles Warren with his huge gun he keeps in his pants is like, yeah, you fucker, get out of here.
You want to play Russian roulette for the job, Kurt?
Yeah, you bastard.
That evening, Spidey is given Minkins' location by Norman and pays him a visit, with Norman and Harry following via Oscorp helicopter, like their assault chopper.
Yeah, so he's like trying to get Menken's location. And then he's like, "Oh yes, thank you, Gargan. Your check's in the mail." And I'm like, "Gargan,
Yeah,
you're
fucking
peppering
thank
shit
you.
in now."
Yeah. He's
At this point, it made me more mad than anything. It's like, come on, you're fucking yanking my tail here.
that was purely thrown in there to either elate you or piss you off.
And then, of course, it turns out that Harry knows how to fly a helicopter.
Yeah, he pulls off this fucking maneuver. He like banks and shatters a bunch of windows with the blades. He cowboys up, he says.
Yeah, he's like a
Harry gets
fucking
really
master
cool.
pilot.
Harry goes straight edge and is suddenly the coolest motherfucker ever. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned it when he was talking about his whole I'm not the goblin spiel. He mentioned that he destroyed his stash of globulin green, so Harry is now straight edge. He's super cool.
Yeah, Harry. So like at the end when he a couple episodes ago when he like opened up his thing and was like, "Ooh, the Goblin Green." When we all thought that he was coming back as the Goblin, he actually when he actually destroyed it, so he wasn't the Goblin that whole time.
I just had the fucking mental image of that meme pop up of the guy holding up the tube with the green liquid in it. Finally, globulin green.
Finally, Globulin Green.
I'm gonna make that and we're gonna tweet it later. Happy season finale.
Let's go.
When Spidey confronts Minkin at this point, gas suddenly floods the apartment, knocking them both out as the Goblin arrives. What follows is a heated battle above the rooftops of New York as Spider-Man and the Green Goblin go to fucking war with each other.
They are beating the fuck out of each other. Did we talk about earlier how the Green Goblin had like a fucking set a bunch of pumpkin bombs at the Osborn penthouse?
Yeah, when it exploded earlier when he made his entrance, yeah.
Yeah, it like
Tons
fucks
of
up.
fucking pumpkin
Peter Sue gets
bombs.
fucked up the whole time. It's like it's an awesome fight.
Very Raimi mask damage here with the exposed eyeball and everything.
Yeah, that or old Kamen Rider episodes.
I'm not as familiar with Kamen Rider as you are, but I'll take your word for that.
Oh, we'll talk. We're going to talk about Kamen Rider when we get to the Toei Spider-Man stuff.
Oh, we for sure are. Yeah, absolutely. The water towers also nearby have been converted into pumpkin bomb cannons, and armed pumpkin-headed goons are on the rooftop and in aircrafts. Spider-Man is absolutely overwhelmed by this onslaught and not able to keep up at all, but eventually does web off the Goblin's mask, which you think would have happened maybe sooner, but maybe Norman wanted it to happen this way. The Green Goblin is, believe it or not, Norman Osborn.
Oh my god, who would have thought?
He's the least suspicious man in New York City.
And like right before that, Harry and Goblin are Goblin and Peter are fighting each other, and Harry is like, if Menken's not the Goblin, and you're not the Goblin, and I'm not the Goblin, then who else knows about the Globulin Green? Is Mom the Green Goblin?
That's so fucking funny to me. I have some trivia about the Osborn mom I'm gonna get into later that makes it even funnier. But yeah, was it Mom?
I literally wrote in my notes, I said that would be really interesting, but they'd have to do a lot of ass pulling to make it work.
Absolutely. That would have felt like such a disappointment. And like when he says that, she literally walks into the room too, so it lends it like a little bit of, oh no, is that actually where they're going with this?
I would have laughed my ass off if it was Norman Osborn's wife who was the Green Goblin.
But yeah, as you were talking about, he's initially confused at this to Norman revelation, but Harry remembers how his father apologized to them earlier. The one thing that Norman Osborn would never do. I think he does like say out loud in an earlier episode of this show that he makes it a point to never apologize. So
yeah, he said it in the very first episode when he gets attacked by the vulture. He's like, I never apologize.
Great fucking character moment there. They really understand.
Callback.
The show really understands Norman. And like he was showing pride in his son in the helicopter too, so of course it couldn't be the real Norman.
And this was the moment right here where I was like, wait, then how are there? And then I'm like, oh shit, I forgot the chameleon existed.
Yeah, he's here, and he's in the helicopter, unmasked. But then he just fucking escapes. He just bails, right?
Yeah, he's like, fuck this shit, and just jumps out of the helicopter with a parachute he had.
See ya, sucker.
I didn't sign up for this bullshit. He leaves.
I don't get to wear the handsome Norman mask anymore. Fuck this. But yes, back with Spidey, Norman explains that he had been the Green Goblin this entire time, having treated himself with Goblin Green in gaseous form, a la Willem Dafoe, to circumvent the nastier side effects, and then goes on to bring up the events of last October when the Goblins stole the inhibitor from Oscorp. Coincidentally, the Chameleon was there that night, disguised as Norman, in an attempt to steal company secrets for a business rival. All very, very convenient. Norman also took advantage of his son's green addiction as a way to dissuade suspicion towards himself, having dressed an unconscious Harry in like 4 seconds in the costume that he was wearing that night, and breaking his son's fucking leg to give him the limp that Norman faked that evening. Just
Absolutely devilish.
Fucking devious, man. It is so fucking good.
Of course I wasn't fool enough to drink it. Small doses in gaseous form increase my strength, agility, intelligence. With no blackouts, no loss of control.
And you've been working with Chameleon the whole time?
Not at first. As Goblin, I appeared at Oscorp to steal my Gobweb inhibitor. Imagine my pleasure at finding Norman Osborn a witness to my crime. It was Chameleon, of course, stealing Oscorp's secrets for a competitor. So this week, I hired him to keep you guessing and set you up for a fall.
But last Halloween, you crashed. The Goblin crashed.
And you saw me limp away. Do you know how easy it is to fake a limp?
But Harry wasn't faking. When I found him that night, he was wearing Goblin's costume, and his leg was really hurt.
More serendipity. You had guessed my identity. I knew I had to redirect your suspicion, and when I returned home, I found Harry passed out from an overdose of green. It didn't take long to deduce the cause of Harry's sudden success at football and in school. It took only slightly longer to dress him as the Goblin. The limp completed the illusion.
You framed your own son?
I protected Harry. If I'd been sent to prison, who'd have made a man out of him?
It's like, it's not the same performance caliber as Defoe's Goblin, but that deviousness, that goddamn, that evil is there. It is so great. I am in love with this version of the character a lot more than a lot of the comic tellings of the character. They really like to play up his businessman aspect in the comics a lot, but this is just all around one of the golden examples of how to write Norman Osborn. This motherfucker is ruthless.
He's so evil, and he hates his son so much.
He hates. I bet he wishes his son was Spider-Man, not to be proud of him, but so he could hate him better. I don't know.
That's one of the reasons that I love Norman Osborn as a character so much, is because I think I've talked about this many times before on the podcast, is where, you know, lots of villains have like these you know, complex motivations for why they do the things that they do. Like, you know, Dr. Otto Octavius wants respect. You know, the Lizard, he wants to, you know, have his arm back, all these sort of different things. But Norman Osborn is just evil because he's evil and he hates his son. He's like, I'm fucking evil. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I completely get that.
It's so great, and they do it so well here.
It's just such a solid take. It's great. Norman claims that in his defense, it was all to protect Harry and make him into the man he was meant to be. Okay. All right. Whatever. Sure, why not?
Whatever you say, buddy.
Norman charges at Spider-Man, and the blade on this glider is fucking sick, by the way. It's like a forked tongue coming out of the creature's mouth. It's really cool. Norman charges at Spider-Man, but Spidey snags a pumpkin bomb and stuffs it into the glider's tailpipe. And the resulting blast causes Norman to fly out of control, and this whole fight scene is paced so quickly. It just fucking happens.
Oh yeah, it's just bow, 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 bow.
he crashes into one of the pumpkin bomb cannons, also lined with bombs, creating an explosion that, to Harry and Peter, seems to them that it just fucking mutilated, killed, blew him up. He's fucking
He
gone.
just got
Atomized.
evaporated,
He
and
got
then
skeletonized.
they instantly hard cut to his funeral.
Fucking like jump cut. It's really jarring.
No
It's
time
almost,
to breathe, just
it's
instant.
almost bad, I would say. The
It's
rest of this
it's
episode
like
does make up for it, but like fucking smack cut, it's bad.
as soon as like they're like fighting and they like reveal that it's Norman Osborn, and I checked the runtime left on the video that I was watching on my computer. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh shit, they
There's,
only
like,
have so
1
much
minute
time to
left.
wrap this
There's
episode
fucking,
up.
like 1 minute left, I swear to God.
It's like,
but yeah.
it's like when they get to the funeral, there's like literally a minute and 30 seconds left, and it's like, what are they gonna do here?
Norman, and he explodes like the fucking Death Star. It's just like bang, 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 bang. There's like little tiny explosions, and then it's just like it fades in, and they're all in front of the grave, and it's like, oh God, okay.
It's like, that was quick.
They're at the funeral. Peter, Harry, and Gwen paying their respects, with Harry bitterly blaming Spider-Man's inaction for the death of his father. I have nothing left except Spider-Man. This causes everybody to fear a green relapse for Harry. Who
Yeah,
quickly...
Harry specifically is like, oh, Gwen, I love you. Like, he's like, obviously with the way that he's speaking, being very facetious, and Peter and Gwen can both really tell. Where he's like, I'm so glad I have you. Otherwise, I would relapse into the taking the goblin sauce again. Oh,
just absolutely devious. He really is Little Goblin Jr. He
goes fucking devil mode. Like,
into
he's
the
like,
man he was always meant to be, Lex.
Exactly. He hates now. Well, just as Norman hated Harry, Harry hates Peter now so much that he's going to like keep him and Gwen apart just just for the fuck of it.
Right. But yeah, like as we said, fearing the green relapse, Harry quickly and a little too conveniently turns to Gwen for support, leaving Peter unable to admit his feelings and unable to do anything about this situation.
Gwen doesn't really have an out with Harry, so they can't be together.
So leaving Peter single, responsible in his mind for the death of his best friend's father and his mentor, who turned out to be a shitbag. No lab to go to. Well, maybe a lab with Dr. Warren.
No girlfriend either, because he broke up with Liz.
Yeah, no Liz. Just absolute down on his shit Parker luck. It is a very Spider-Man ending. And I want to say the last thing he says, like out loud in this show, is that the city is safe. And at least there's that. And that just really, really hits, man. It is such a solid Spider-Man ending. Everything is shit. I have nothing, but the city is safe. So I can sleep tonight. At the airport, the Connors are off to start their new life in Florida, or somewhere. While
Yeah,
a
they
stewardess...
say the plane is going to Miami, I think.
Great, yeah, that's where they belong. Nice and temperate. While a stewardess apologizes to a passenger for a delay in his flight to the Grand Cayman, he tells her not to apologize and replies slyly that he never does.
It's literally just it's blonde Norman Osborn with a mustache.
It's absolutely just like the Silence of the Lambs ending, but like without a
it's
phone
straight up
call. I love it. It's so fucking great. He just dyed his hair blonde, bought a stupid little fake mustache, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to Miami to do cocaine at a rave." I love it. Norman wins.
And then the show ends forever. I feel like Woody at like in Toy Story 2 when he's watching his own TV show and it ends on the cliffhanger and he's like, what happens next?
What happens to the Roundup gang? Well, nothing.
Are they gonna save the Roundup gang?
Nothing happens, as a matter of fact. It's just over.
The show is just over.
Yeah, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Spectacular Spider-Man. That's everything that happens in it. You've been hearing about it for a month now.
I'm very I don't know how to feel about how the fact that my prediction of the show having the most ludicrous cliffhanger ever in the last episode, I was absolutely right. They had the
I
most fucking ridiculous cliffhanger.
I was talking to a friend last night about catching up on stuff for the podcast, and I said, yeah, I just finished up a show, and it just ended, and I feel pretty bad about it. And they were like, oh, was it a cliffhanger? Or did it have a bad ending? And I said, yeah, it did. Yes, both of those things.
Because and we talked about it in the end of the first season, where that has a really nice, it's a really great ending for the season. It ties everything up
Yeah,
with a nice
absolutely.
bow, leaves some threads they could pick up on in the second season. And meanwhile, here they just blow their load, and it's like, here's all this shit that we can pick up on, and then it just never happens.
They got so caught up in trying to give us the ending that they struggled to give us an ending. And
Yeah.
it does so much in so little time that it raises more questions than it answers. Where the fuck is Aunt May? We get no Aunt May ending, which sucks.
Aunt May really isn't in this back half, like, at all.
They
She shows up a couple times, but
the
not a
last
lot.
time we see her, I think she's with a different doctor who isn't her horny doctor.
And she ends up talking to Peter, I think in one of these more recent episodes, about like he owes it to Liz and Gwen to like make up his mind about the two of them.
Yeah, it really
and
sucks.
like that's the last time we ever see her.
It really sucks because this is a really solid Aunt May we have in this show, and they just struggled to find a way to use her after the heart attack arc.
Yeah, part of me wants to say that they just kind of like were like, oh shit, this show's not gonna make a third season. I don't know that for certain. Maybe I got my facts wrong, and that they thought they were going to have a third season. But part of me thinks that with all the network shuffling and rights management that was going on, they knew they weren't going to get a third season. They're like, let's just try to shove in as much as we can. So it's like most of the shit with all the shit with Miles, not getting picked up on, Hobgoblin. Basically anything that else that Doc Ock was going to do, anything, it's everything is on the table.
Yeah. I do think they were gunning for a third season. I have some trivia that briefly discusses that, but we'll get to that whenever we're ready to start that.
Well, I mean, we're here at the end of the episode, so
Woohoo!
Alex, do you want to talk about the any fun facts for this television program?
I do, yeah. I have. I've been pretty lax on the trivia in the second and third episodes, just because I had some introductory stuff, but a lot of this is pretty comprehensive and deals with having a working knowledge of the entire show. And I'm glad I didn't look into it too much because there's a lot of spoilers here and there. But I do have a solid chunk of trivia retrospectively. The original plan for the show was 65 episodes, which is 39 more than we got. They were going to try to map it out a little better in the future. What I have here is that, according to Weissman, the Scorpion, the Hobgoblin, Mr. Negative, Hydro Man, and Carnage were all slated to make first appearances in a third season.
Yeah, because I forgot about Hydro Man and Carnage. Yeah, there was so much they had left on the table.
Roderick Kingsley, Morris Bench, and Cletus Cassidy all had brief cameos in the second season. Bench would have been voiced by Bill Fagerbakke, who most of us know as Patrick Starr. As you mentioned, Mac Gargan is also mentioned very, very briefly at the end. And some fans have speculated that background extras could be other characters, but I don't buy into a lot of that type of stuff. Mrs. Osborne, Emily Osborne, would have had a speaking role in season 3. Wiseman wanted Star Trek's Marina Sirtis for the voice of the character.
That would have been fun.
Yeah, it would have, why not, right? She
Let Marina Sirtis get that bag.
The Gobliness. Somehow, and I don't know how any of this international shit works, but somehow Canada aired the entire second season before it even began airing in the US.
Oh my god.
So, if you're a Canadian listener, I hope that was a good time for you. Weissman has gone on the record to say that he intended for MJ to ultimately become Peter's main love interest. But he wanted to imitate their romance in the comics and their parallel character development by starting them off with a false romantic lead. Mark Allen for MJ and Liz and Gwen alternatively for Peter. before actively starting an actual relationship with them as time went on.
The real question is, were they ever going to kill Gwen? I feel like that would be too hardcore for a kids show.
That is actually one of my next pieces of trivia. I just wanted to have it on the record first that I don't have a favorite girlfriend for Peter. That's a debate a lot of nerds like to have, just because polyamorous King Peter Parker pulls, you know. But
A lot of nerds with nothing better to do having arguments about that shit.
I don't have a favorite girlfriend for Peter. I recognize that all of them bring different things to the table. They bring different things to his life, and they're all very different people who serve very different roles in his life. With that said,
let Peter hook
I
up
don't
with Betty Brant.
Exactly, yeah. I don't have a proclivity towards MJ, but I don't know. It does feel right for this character, maybe eventually after they figured out Gwen. But with that said, about Gwen, Weissman has also gone on the record to say that he had no plans whatsoever to kill Gwen during the course of this show, and further admitted to being disturbed by fan comments and comments from other co-workers about when he was, quote, gonna kill her, when he noted that the nature of a children's superhero show precluded that kind of content. He has also
When are they going to kill this 14-year-old?
When are you gonna do it, Greg? Never. He admitted that were the show successful enough to create possible home movie tie-ins, like Batman Beyond's Return of the Joker, that kind of thing, he would have gunned for a PG-13 content rating, but at the same time has always been adamant that he never intended to kill this version of Gwen. Huge respect there. I really like this version of Gwen, and it's really refreshing to have an arc that isn't just dangling her in a noose in front of us like Amazing Spider-Man 2 was.
And that's one of the things that's kind of hard to it's hard to have Gwen in anything where she's not where she doesn't have spider powers, because everyone knows Gwen Stacy as Spider-Man's girlfriend who dies.
Yes.
So it would be interesting to have them just, kind of break up and drift apart as people, and not have her be another list on Peter's, number of things to be guilty about.
Exactly. Yeah, it was great to see her be a living, breathing, acting like part of the puzzle for the majority of the show.
And now that just makes me upset that we never got a PG-13 television movie of this program.
We've had this conversation already about whether or not they should or will bring this show back, but honestly, I think that'd be a great route. Would be like a cap-off movie, like have some time have passed in universe and do like a college movie or something. That would be
fun.
Totally an idea.
It would be fun, and it would be better than having it be a revival series. Because if they did a revival series, it would just lead for people to be like, "Oh, another season, blah 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 blah."
Yeah,
If they just did like a movie, it'd be like, "All right, cool, we got everything."
And that's 90 fucking minutes of content you've got there. That's like 4 episodes. That's not nothing. That's pretty much like a third of a season right there.
Exactly.
It's an idea. I think they could do something with that. I think they're on like the 4th season of the current Spider-Man cartoon they're doing. I know nothing about it. I know people don't love it.
There's been like 8 Spider-Man cartoons in between Spectacular and now. I know lots of people like the new one that's out now. He's at like a sciencey high school, but it's like a super advanced sciencey high school, and people are having complaining a lot in the same way that they complain about the Tom Holland movies, where it's like, oh, it's too much technology, and it's like I haven't watched the show, so I have no idea, but who knows? It's something that we're gonna be hearing about for like ever.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple bits of extra trivia here. We've talked about voice actors reprising stuff from previous parts of content. I don't know if I specifically mentioned or not that D. Bradley Baker was the Lizard as in this show, as well as the first Activision Spider-Man game. But past that, Bill Fagerbakke, who, as I mentioned earlier, voices just the Morris bench that shows up in this show. He voiced Hydro Man in The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. So that's another.
Oh, hey.
So, hey, you want to do Hydro Man again, but not really? It's just, I don't know. I love little things like that. It just makes the world feel a little more together.
That'll be fun when we talk about that later on.
Past that, the final voicing trivia I think I have here. Greg Weisman is the voice of Minkin. I don't know if we ever pointed that out or not in our little like.
Yeah,
chat
I
room
never
thing.
even pointed. No, I never noticed that or pointed that out.
Yeah, that's
That's
Weisman
fun.
himself as Mr. Forgettable. There was an advertised contest to have your school appear in a future episode of the show. I don't know who won. I just know this existed, and it appears in the episode Gangland, supposedly. So
Huh. I get
if you,
maybe it might have been maybe it was like they list off another school
yeah, maybe it was
where
like during the trophy thing or something, and they maybe mentioned
that's
it.
that's what I was trying to get to. I just couldn't get the words out right. Or maybe it's
Yeah,
those two kids that we never mentioned in the Gangland episode that are like running around and like almost get crushed by that chandelier.
it's almost assuredly something like that. But that would have been a fun thing to do as a kid. That
Yeah.
I love the idea of that kind of shit. The original plan for the show, with everything else we've mentioned, was to create extra material for each episode and then use it to edit each story arc into a movie for the DVD releases. Only the first arc was released like this before Sony switched to just plain episodes. So there is a little bit of extra footage that we haven't seen, you and I, that exists for the first season, and there's a
Yeah.
ton that nobody will ever see.
Oh my god,
So
you Sony, you fuckers,
that movie idea has kicked around in someone's head regarding this
you
specific part of
sons
the
of
IP.
bitches.
Just a couple things left here. Silvermane and Silver Sable, Weissman has admitted, are only related in the show because they both have silver in their names, and I fucking love that. Like we've talked about with everything, with like Montana being the Shocker, with Fancy Dan becoming Ricochet. I don't give a shit. Who cares enough about Silver Sable and Silvermane to go, what? They're not related in the comics. Who cares? They're related now.
It works, whatever, who cares?
The final piece of trivia I have is less trivia and just something I read that struck me as really funny. I have no way to like measure the veracity of this statement, but according to TV tropes, a large chunk of the fan base of this show refers to this show as "Bitches Love Spider-Man," the animated series.
Who the fuck says that? I mean, it's true.
I do now.
But sure, bitches love. I mean, yeah. I mean, I already talked about a couple episodes ago where it's like the whole. I don't remember what episode it was, but the whole problem of that episode where that Peter pulls too much. Yeah, bitches love Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's that's the only way I'm gonna call this show from now on. That's its official name. But
I
yes,
gotta change all the fucking art and titles of the episodes.
that concludes my trivia for the Spectacular Spider-Man.
All right. I guess we can go on to the our sort of overall thoughts for this show in general, I guess, now that we've gotten everything done.
Mhm.
I guess I'll go first.
Please do.
This show, I had my problems with this show, especially sort of in that in this particularly this back half with how rushed the final episode is, despite how insane it is and how much I kind of loved it. And kind of how it felt like some of the plot points were kind of meandering, didn't really go anywhere. My favorite episode of the show still probably is, I think, episode 12 of season 1, the one where he gets rid of the symbiote and they have the big Uncle Ben flashback. But overall, this kind of lived up to the hype. This was a really, really good show, and I'm glad I was finally able to sit down and watch it.
Mhm.
The writing is incredibly tight, except for those slip ups I already talked about. The acting is really good across the board. I'm going to say this a lot. It just gets the character. It understands what Spider-Man is about, and I'm not going to turn into one of those guys that like demands a revival series, but maybe that movie.
Yeah, I like you said, the characterization is first and foremost just hot here. It is on fire. It is so perfect. It really captures the things that make Peter Peter and the things that make Spider-Man Spider-Man without wearing out their welcome for each. Because it's super easy for a story to get too quippy, too jokey, too Parker Lucky. It's really easy to hit all the hallmarks correctly, but still have a product that doesn't work as a good piece of Spider-Man media. We've seen plenty of those. Um, it it definitely earns the hype that's around it. I will say that in complete fairness, having seen all of it now. there's a ton of hype around this show, and I was apprehensive to get into it because of that hype. But no, it's solid, and I completely agree that it doesn't need to be, necroed and paraded around as, hey, look, we brought back Spectacular Spider-Man. But I do like the idea of them revisiting it with like a cap off movie one day. It's definitely a solid idea. It presented versions of villains that we're very, very familiar with, but with new lenses to them that gave depth that there wasn't in before. They really, did their best with the Raimi Sandman and the heel turn that follows with him, but I loved this version of the Sandman. I loved seeing Hammerhead claw his way up and try to, usurp the throne of crime himself. There's motivations and forces driving these characters beyond, I'm gonna rob the bank, I'm gonna take this armored car. There is so much to this show that it absolutely, I think, transcends being a children's Spider-Man show. It's just a solid watch. Probably not if you're not a Spider-Man fan, but if you are, there is a lot in this show for you. And if you're not a Spider-Man fan, why the fuck are you listening to this podcast outside of maybe being my pal? Yeah, it's the show is mostly roses, handful of thorns, but honestly, at the end of the day, it's spectacular. Pun fully intended. I fucking love this show. I wish it had more room to breathe, especially in this really heavy back half. But I don't have a ton of complaints. I think this has my favorite version of a handful of these characters, specifically Dr. Connors. I'm big into here. It does a lot of things right. It does more right than it does wrong, and at the end of the day, that's all you can hope for from a Spider-Man piece.
Absolutely. I fully agree with everything you've said.
And I cannot recommend this show enough.
Absolutely. If you can, the people are selling, like, there's old DVD copies of this show. Fucking torrent it. Do what you got to do to watch this show. Don't be one of those weird assholes that constantly like subtweets corporations demanding product. Get a life. But
get a life.
Get a life.
It's really great to show contempt for your audience.
It's great. I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things.
I know it.
This show is good. It's very, very good. We don't have any letters. So, yeah, that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got a question or a comment that you want us to read on next week's episode, be sure to send it to us at our email address, spideysignalspodcast@gmail.com. Or you could send us a DM on our Twitter, @SpideySignals. Please, I beg you. Next week, episode 6, we are finally going to have our first guest of the season. We're moving on to something else that's not a television program. We're going to be talking about Kraven's Last Hunt with one of my very good friends, Lumber Jackson. So until then, stay responsible. Bye.
Later, sucker.
Fuck you.
Spider-Man.